I'm going to have an appointment. This person's going to make me show up. They're going to teach me how to exercise, maybe work around some injuries, whatever that is. And they're going to get me to do some things outside the gym, even their gym. They're going to help me be successful, whether it be more steps or trying to eat better, whatever those things are. And so it just makes it a lot easier in this day and age because that term personal training is so much more familiar to everyone.
Rick is the founder of Alloy Personal Training, which is a personal training studio that has franchises all over the country. One of the things that we talk about a lot that you will see weave in and out of this conversation is, quote, paying the piper, is the way that Rick puts it, because so many people have a hard time understanding the importance of having a coach, having a trainer, having someone to guide you and show you how to make yourself better, whether you're talking about your health and fitness, whether you're talking about your personal development, whether you're talking about how to present better in public. Having somebody to guide you on how to do it is the most effective strategy to get it done. So paying the piper is the idea that you either pay the piper now or you pay the piper later. If you pay the piper now, you have a much higher likelihood of achieving the things that you want to achieve in life. Whereas later, you're not technically going to pay the piper financially, although you partly will. What you're going to pay with is regret and not doing the things that you wanted to do in life and instead living a life that happened to you instead of happened for you. So make sure you listen to this beginning to end. The end of this conversation is just fantastic. The last 10 minutes or so, he just unpacks so much good stuff about the importance of showing up and keeping going and why their retention rate at Alloy, which is 36 months, which is absolutely phenomenal for a freaking studio or gym of any sort. 36 months is insane. We talk so much about how they do that as well. So make sure that you get your pen and paper out. But of course, before you do that, make sure you hit the pause button and go rate or review the podcast so that we can reach more people. When you rate and review, we can then reach more and help more people. So it's greatly appreciated that you do that. Enjoy this conversation with Rick Mayo. Rick, good to see you, brother. I got to tell you, we didn't talk about this in the intro because I wanted to be part of the show. This is kind of exciting for me, especially because, 12 years ago, maybe, I saw you at a Perform Better clinic before you had changed the studio name to Alloy. I forget the name of the studio before Alloy.
Who knows? We've had probably 4 names in our 33 years in history, but that's awesome. So you're saying 12 years ago?
It was at least 10 years ago. It may have been a little longer than that. I can't really remember.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was cool. And the cool thing about it is it wasn't too long after that. I opened my own studio. I actually owned a studio for 10 years. I just closed it last year. And a lot of the things that you taught, especially the price structure that you taught back then, I don't know if your Alloy structure is similar. I'm sure it's somewhat similar, but I don't know if it's the same as what you were teaching then. I actually built our structure based on what you taught. And I actually saw, I think Mark Fisher, I don't think he talked then, but I think he was there and maybe I heard him talking to somebody. Anyway, I started looking at Mark Fisher too and seeing Mark Fisher Fitness, and I saw how they were doing things and running things. And I built the community based off of what you talked about and doing things around community and what he talked about or how they do things at Mark Fisher and building it around a purpose. Which, going back to the wolf thing, sorry, I'm like hijacking this right now. We're going to start.
Go for it.
I'll start asking questions in a second. So going back to the wolf thing, what actually ended up working out, because Rick and I were talking before where Good Wolf came from, and the name comes from a Cherokee legend. I'm not going to go into the story now, but it worked out because we called our community the Pack. So when I came up with, I actually started the podcast before we shut the gym down. And so it worked out well. Anyway, long intro.
Love it. Well, and listen, if it was 12 years ago, that's amazing. I've been around for so long. It's awesome and embarrassing at the same time. And now Mark, who you mentioned, is now an Alloy franchisee, which is super cool.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a great honor to have a guy who's runs his own mastermind group, who's as dynamic as Mark, choose to spend his own hard-earned money, on our franchise, which is super cool. So I'm really honored by that. And I really like he and his partner Greg are great guys.
Yeah, most definitely. I actually had him on the show sometime last year. I can't remember when
Okay.
that was. And yeah, that was a cool experience too. So
Thank you.
yeah, most definitely. Well, Mark is, like you said, super dynamic dude. So lots of knowledge in that guy.
Yeah, 100%.
So most of who we're talking to, most of the audience is going to be general population. Not a,
Okay.
we have some business owners and so on, but most of who we're talking to is general population. So I'd like to go at this from the side of, I know how you run things generally at Alloy. So I'd like to go at it from that side, looking at it through the coach's lens and saying, how do we start to improve how people follow through with the goals and dreams that they want for themselves? Because you guys do a great job of keeping people around. I think it was 36 months is your retention rate.
Yeah. Yeah. Average.
That's impressive. That is impressive.
Appreciate that.
So, yes, that's impressive. So, I believe in my mind, it starts with changing people's mindset about what they come in for and then what they actually end up staying for.
Yeah, 100%. Like, look, our director of operations for studios, so VP of ops for the most part, all things studio related, which programming, customer experience, everything around that. He often says that people come for the fitness goal and they stay for the community long term. So to your point, you're exactly right. They might come in for one reason, but they end up staying long term for a completely different reason.
So, first, I'm curious how you started to make that own shift in your mind as to, because I'm sure once you started, it was like, oh, I want to start because I want to help people lose weight or get a six pack or whatever it is. I know for me, it was just like people just started walking up to me like, hey, can I train? Can you train me? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll train you.
Can you work? Can you train me? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. So, how'd you start to make that connection?
Yeah, look, this was 33 years ago. So I was a junior in college. And like a lot of folks, I started working out at a younger age for sports. And then I got a little older, you get interested in girls, and so you also you want to look good and also be good at sports. And it turns out I was better at training for sports than I was at actual sports. Go figure. And so it just sort of stuck. It was something my dad and I started in the garage and it just became a part of my lifestyle. And it was such an easy way while I was in college as like a side hustle to earn income. So for me, it was just like something I would do for free, honestly, that I could actually monetize. So it didn't feel like work. And so at the time, imagine 1992. I don't. Were you born in 1992? I don't even know.
I was 84. So I was
There you
around a
go.
little bit. I can remember 92.
You're still watching cartoons and having bowls
Yeah,
of
yeah.
cereal on the TV. That's cool. We hear that a lot, as you can
No
imagine.
doubt.
But at the time, fitness was a bit different, and we were probably one of the first ever dedicated facilities just to personal training. And the reason we opened a facility was because I was in an exercise science major in school, in college, and a lot of people wanted to do what I was already doing. Like they wanted to be a personal trainer. I'm like, well, I'm already doing that, right? And I was traveling around town, going to different health clubs, going to people's homes. A lot of folks didn't even really know what a personal trainer was at the time. But I would just for convenience and like, hey, it's this high-end service. Like, let's put four walls around it, create a customer experience around this service, right? This high-end service, and see if we can make a run at it. And as far as I know, at least in the Atlanta area, which is where we're located, we were the only dedicated personal training center that just did that, right? So it was a bit of a novel concept at the time, but it really came out of a need for the service itself, and then me personally just to centralize where the location for me, so I wasn't bouncing around to people's homes and working in different health clubs. And so that's mainly why I did it at the time. And I can still remember people would call and be like, what is it that you do? And you'd have to explain, well, you come in and you pay me and then I hold you accountable and I teach you how to exercise, right? And hold you accountable to it. And they're like, huh,
Crazy idea.
okay. Yeah, great. What a weird concept, right? Of course, obviously it's evolved and it's a boilerplate type of, offering these days where you say personal training, people are like, or if people say like, I want to get in shape, I need to hire a trainer, right? So it makes a lot more sense now. But back then, man, it was brand new concept, and we spent just as much time explaining what we do as we did, again, client programming and price and everything else. So it was just a different animal altogether. But yeah, we really opened it just out of necessity based on convenience and to put a better customer experience around this really high end service.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a conversation with another guy in Australia who kind of has the same journey, if you will. And he said the same thing when he got started mid 90s or so. You had to explain to people what it was. The funny thing is, the fitness studio that I owned, it was in a city called Alexandria, Kentucky. If you haven't heard of it, there's a reason you haven't heard of it. Um, but it, it's behind the times, and it was the same thing. Like, people didn't understand what we did, which in hindsight, looking at it now, the location was not where it needed to be, and that's a
Right.
reflection on my own part. But nonetheless, people didn't understand what we did. Well, what do you mean? Do you have open gym? No, we don't have open gym. Well, what do you mean? So, it's still a struggle, I
Like,
think,
can't
to a
you on my
degree.
own? I'm like, no, that's why you're calling me, because you don't go in on your own. They're like, got it. Right.
Got it.
Right.
So to go to the next step then is what holds people back from many studios is the price, the number, right?
Right.
Because we're sold that fitness costs $20 a month. That's what we're
Right.
sold.
Right.
And so as a fitness studio owner, it's somewhat of a struggle to fight that message, because that is so bombarded at us. It has been for decades almost, that fitness costs $20. We got Planet
Right.
Fitness now, Crunch Fitness, even Esporta, all those places. They're maybe $30 or $40 a month. So the idea of spending $300 a month at a gym, quote unquote, at a gym for a gym membership, is a
Right.
foreign idea to somebody. So, what are some of the things that you have found to help people understand what they're paying for?
Well, I think we mentioned earlier just consumer awareness about the service of personal training. The awareness is so much higher now. I mean, we made a point when we went to franchising to have it on the front door. It's Alloy, a lot of people call us Alloy Fitness. It's not, it's Alloy Personal Training. And we do that because that service comes with service anchors, meaning like, what do I get, and pricing anchors as well. So if you look at the way that we service personal training, it's a bit unique. Maybe not if you're in the fitness space like you are, but to the consumer, it's a bit unique because we service it in a group of up to 6. And we can do that and still meet the brand promise of specificity and accountability, but we can do it at a much better value proposition. So if you mentioned, say, joining a Crunch Fitness as an example, and you're paying $9 a month, there's still personal trainers in there that you're going to have to pay a pretty hefty rate to do an hour or 30 minutes of personal training, whatever that may be. You're buying, a session for personal training. And we can normally beat those prices, you know, at a pretty good margin, as far as a percentage, just because we've done it long enough. And since year like 2000, we've been doing personal training in a small group setting. So we're really good at it. So we can do that. And it sort of brings in the community of the group and the specificity of personal training. And again, it's just a better value proposition. But the good news is these days that having the name on the door, personal training, there is a pricing anchor that goes with that. And it's usually much more expensive per session than what we can charge. So, we might be sitting between $400 and $500 a month, but if you're working out 3 days a week and you're paying, say, $40 a session in those same markets, you'll be paying upwards of 80, sometimes over $100 a session. But we have franchisees in, say, Alexandria, Virginia, some of the most expensive zip codes in the country. In those markets, you might be paying 150, upwards of $200 a session for personal training. So even if we come in at $50 or $60 a session, even though the monthly cost, if you just look at it in its totality, might seem expensive, when you break it down per session, which is what you should do, it's much, much less expensive. So it's a really good value proposition. So part of it is just consumer awareness is at the point now where if we hang that shingle on the door and we say, this is what we do, It's not lost on people that walk in there what that's going to cost. They've probably had a friend that's done training. Maybe they've experienced personal training in a different setting at some point in their lives. So it's really not hard to explain to people why it's expensive. And we spend very little time these days talking about what we do, right? It's normally people come in. I mean, look, imagine the conversation at a cocktail party, like, hey, you look great, Jeremy. What have you been doing? Oh, I hired a trainer. So it's these days, I need to get in shape. I need to hire a blank, right? It's just more commonplace. So it doesn't take a lot of explanation on our part to explain like why they need us. They know I'm going to have an appointment. This person's going to make me show up. They're going to teach me how to exercise, maybe work around some injuries, whatever that is. And they're going to get me to do some things outside the gym, even their gym. They're going to help me be successful, whether it be more steps or trying to eat better, whatever those things are. And so it just makes it a lot easier in this day and age because that term personal training is so much more familiar to everyone.
Yeah, you make a good point about the personal training label because I think there's a lot of fitness studios out there that are just whatever fitness, blah fitness. Like we were,
Yeah.
like we changed the name of the studio, I think 3 times. And one of them was Thrive Fitness. And,
Right.
and so it's a very generic, you go, okay, what do you really expect from it? So whenever we would get a call, people would struggle to understand. And then the price was more of a barrier, but the personal
Right.
training stamp, like you said, the name alone comes
Yeah.
with
This is
an
all that we
idea.
do.
Yeah.
Right.
And it comes with an idea of price. So
Yeah.
that alone is a very good, and the breakdown is important because I think people look at the lump sum. They think $300 a month, but you're
Well, here's
like,
some interesting stats for you too, just to
yeah,
consider. So
hmm
across the continental US, the average price of personal training is around $80 an hour. That's everywhere. It's including the Midwest, Southeast. I mean, you name it, right? I mean, this isn't just using the most expensive markets. So if the average price is $80 a session, our most expensive pricing tier in whatever market is still going to come in much less than that per session. And to your point, all retail, anyone that markets anything understands that you always unit price things, right? So yes, in totality, it looks expensive. Now I'll argue it's still inexpensive. Here's another stat. The average car payment in the US right now is around $800 a month, average. And so if you're
is it
talking
that
about
high
coming
now?
in,
That's crazy.
yeah. Yeah. So if you come in at $400 or $500 for personal training, yes, you have to have the discretionary income to afford that, but that goes into the real estate choices and everything of where we put these things, right? They need to be a target rich environment for our customer avatar. Got it. And we've got really advanced software for franchising where we've already mapped out the whole lower 48. We're only going to put it in those areas. So if you put it in those areas, you put personal training on the door, then you offer a good value proposition for that service to the right customer avatar. It's really not that difficult to describe it, convince people that it's worth it, to sell them. I'm air quoting if you're not watching. It's just not that difficult anymore. And thankfully, that's just because the consumer awareness of personal training and what we do is really well known.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, that personal training stamp definitely does a big number. Um, so I'm curious, 36-month retention rate on average, which is incredible. I heard you say in one of your interviews recently that, and I completely concur with this because we saw it at the studio, that
Right.
people who are in a group fitness setting, they will stay at a place shorter on average, and people who do personal training or group training, they will stay longer on average.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
I I really think it boils down to the specificity to the customer. So I'll give you an example. So in our original corporate facility, it sits in a shopping center just around the corner from our corporate office. The corporate office used to be the actual working facility for clients. I'm in the same retail space I started leasing in 1992. We've just expanded,
That's
still in the
cool.
same building. I've probably walked through that front door millions of times at this point. But I ran into a lady in the parking lot she was headed to the grocery store in the shopping center where we moved our corporate facility. And she runs over and she's like, I finally got client of the month, right? Because we'll do like a feature client of the month. And she's been there 28 years. So
Whoa.
she's like, I finally got client of the month, right? She started out when she was like in her 50s. And I'm like, well, great, maybe you'll get it again in the future. We were kind of, she's like, well, I'll be dead by then. I was like, good talk, I'm going to the grocery store. But
Yeah.
I kind of laughed, but she might be right if it was another 28 years, of course. But there's no way that you can keep someone for 28 years with a one-trick pony service offering, right? You can't just be a bicycle or a single modality, as we would say, a rower, or just class-based where one size fits all. So I think one of the reasons, the long answer, one of the reasons that it's so sticky is, life and fitness in life, it's a journey, right? You're not always, it's not like you start here and then you just, beeline to your goal and you reach your ultimate fitness level and then you stay there forever. Life just doesn't work that way. If I think about this particular lady as an example, when we started with her, she owned a huge consulting company, very successful. She was married. All these things were happening. Her husband, got cancer and passed away, sadly. She retired from her business. She's in a new relationship. So there's all of these things that happen in people's lives, and she's been injured. She had to have a rotator cuff surgery at one point from a fall. So there's all these things that have happened to her. Well, in a personal training setting, we can manage people through those ups and downs because you can make it very specific to the individual, and that can be based on that specific time frame in their life, right? So if you take her as an example, obviously, if you're going through something horrible, like your life partner or your spouse has cancer, you're not going to be, on your game from a fitness standpoint. You're lucky to make it in there twice a week just to survive and try to keep your health as best you can. So we can manage people through that. We can manage them when they are on their game and they're trying to lose weight. You go skiing in Colorado and you tear your ACL. It's like, great. In a normal fitness setting or class-based concept, you're like, hey, I need to take time off. I'm hurt. If they come to us and say that, well, hold on, you still have one leg that works, your core and your upper body still works. So like, can't quit, right? We'll get you in here. You'll go in our facilities. There'll people rolling around from a torn Achilles from pickleball or something, and they're on that little scooter, going from thing to thing, and we're coaching them through it's personal training. So I think really just the structure of the business allows us to manage people's fitness throughout their lives for a long period of time, because life happens, things come up, injuries, family issues, work, changes, whatever those things are. If you're just one modality, it's going to be very difficult to keep that person. For us, we can keep them forever because we can manage them through all of those life's ups and downs.
That was such a perfect explanation. Again, looking back
I mean,
on,
you experienced it, right? I
yeah,
mean, that's probably what you saw as well.
100%. Looking back on the 10 years with the fitness studio, it was the same thing. In a group setting, it's easier for somebody also to kind of like get lost, if you will, depending on how big the group setting is. So the accountability isn't there as much. Like you said, having to change exercises is much harder for them. Now, our group setting was only up to, I think our biggest ones, we would make 15 or 17 people or something
Right.
to that effect. So it's not huge, but it's big enough
Right.
that for one coach, it's challenging to go and try and change some things for this person. And then that person's struggling and this person's new. So that makes it hard. Whereas definitely our semi-private training clients, they were there on average much longer. I think our retention rate for our semi-private clients was 18 to 20 months, something to that effect.
I mean, it's interesting because talking to someone like you who has experience, you've experienced the different service levels. And we had that at one point as well. At one point before we went to franchising, we were licensing consulting and fitness services, writing workouts, all the things to 2,500 door fronts from India to Dubai, Tasmania, everything in between, right? And so we were servicing many different levels of fitness, like sort of verticals, if you will. So we could do virtual training, we could do class-based concepts, and we could do small group personal training and a little bit of one-on-one training. Now, our sweet spot and our big revenue earner and the thing that made us stickiest for us, best retention, was always small group personal training. But for other brands, we might be building boot camp type of things. So we felt like, to be able to build those, we need to run them and practice them to have any integrity. So we also had a service offering at one point for many years that was class-based. That particular cohort of customers would always churn much greater than if we could get them to level up into personal training of any kind. So our personal training clients stayed forever. Our class-based only clients were pretty much the industry average, right? Which right now I think it's about 5 months to stay in a class-based concept. I think we beat that a little bit, and we keep people like 7 months on average. But yeah, just getting them into personal training is much better. And I would argue a lot of people, that's one of our claims, and something we do well is our retention level is way better than class-based concepts. And people will say, well, why is that? I'm like, well, imagine a model that's so small. We try to keep it less than 150 members. And we do that on purpose. I mean, if you've heard of Dunbar's number, which is Robin Dunbar is a British scientist, and he studied societies back to ancient civilization up to now, and basically try to decide like how many people can you have a really close cognitive relationship with outside of friends and family. And the number he came up with was 150. It's often called the rule of 150. It's called Dunbar's number. But if you just use behavioral science, 150 people or less is an environment where, Jeremy, I want to know your name. I want to know your kids' names. I'm going to know about your family life. When you walk in the door, I'm going to ask you how your kid's soccer game went this weekend, whatever those things are. You cannot do that with 700 members in a class-based concept and 25 people with a clock. I'm wearing a headset. You can't do it in that setting. No matter how good you are, it just logistically doesn't work. And I know because we ran that for 15 years, that particular vertical. But boy, you put them into a small group and you know their names, you know everything about them. That alone, just the business structure will make it so much stickier for the customer. And they know you just as well. They know you, they know your spouse, they know your kids' names. I mean, all of that lends itself to a really close-knit family feeling environment. And that alone, just the business structure, will drive much, much higher retention. So that's, I mean, and its bare essence, that's probably the key, right? I know people are like, is it your rewards programs? Is it all these other customer service things we do? Sure. But some of those wouldn't even be possible at the level that we're trying to deliver them if we had more than 150 people, if that makes sense. So I would say the reason it's so sticky, quite honestly, is just because there's not that many people to take care of and you can know them on an intimate level.
Yeah, I totally see that. At our max, we had 125 members, and that felt like a lot.
Right.
That felt like a lot, meaning for
Right.
me, and for me at that point, I was getting to the point where someone would walk in and I'd go, "Hey," and I'd have to pause to remember their name, right?
Hey, guy, how are you?
"Hey,
Right,
fella, good to
exactly.
see
Hey,
you.
dude.
Good to see you." Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas up to 100, at 100, it's like it's pretty easy. You can remember everybody's name, and it's pretty simple. So I can definitely see once you get past that 130, 140, definitely 150 mark, things just start to get watered down and it becomes more
Yeah.
challenging. And even from a community standpoint, I'm sure you guys are the same. You have people who train in the morning and they train in the evening, and they don't get to see each other. But outside of that, everybody who trains in the morning, and everybody who trains in the evening.
Yes.
So that's always a cool thing too, from a community standpoint, that to be able to see those people make those connections and everybody know each other.
Yeah. And look, we have so many soft systems on how to facilitate those relationships. There's ways you can do it. Like it may not happen organically, but you can put systems in your business that will force those interactions between customers, right? It may not look like that's what you're doing, but that's the purpose of those systems, right? To force
Yep.
them to get to know each other. And I used to always tell this story a long time ago when I would be singing the praises of small group personal training when it was novel and no one had ever heard of it. Because people were like, how can you do that? It's like taking the personal out of personal training. I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, when we switched from one-on-one to small group, we were doing 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month. We did not have a broken business. So the opportunity cost in pivoting away from that to start servicing people in groups was a big risk. Would we lose like accountability and specificity in those things? And it was the exact opposite. Like people's adherence to the program, their results, everything went up because now there was a different level of accountability, not just to the coach and the business, but to the other people in that group. And people in personal training, as you know, they typically stick to a similar schedule just so they can build a life around it and make it consistent. So if you're a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. person, you're probably in that group with a lot of other people that are also consistently Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 a.m. So you get to know these people on a level that, and they become really good friends, right? I mean, we've got
Mhm.
groups that are still together in our corporate gym where the same 6 people have been in the group for 16, 17, 18 years. We have one group that's been together for 23 years. So imagine that you're in the
Wow.
same group with the same people for 23 years. You know everything about them. So there's a
Yep.
level of stickiness to that even
Mhm.
supersedes like the relationship with the coach or the gym, right? So the people themselves become part of that accountability. So yeah, there's just so many nuanced things, right, that go into a model. But back to your original point, you've experienced this as well. You really can't do that if you've got 500 members, but you can do it really well at that 150 or less.
Yeah. So I'm curious to go back to the systems. What I want to hit on real quick before we wrap up. Again, retention rate of 36 months is phenomenal, and there's a reason for that. And a lot of it is what we've already talked about, but then there's these other things that matter as well. Some of them are those systems. So we had our semi-private system we called the 8 steps of a kick-ass semi-private session or something to that effect. Step 1, when they walk in the door, say their name. Step 2, ask them how they're doing. Step 3, so on and so forth. And like you said, a lot of it was built to get people connected. If somebody's new, make sure you introduce them to the group.
Yes.
Play the name game. Hey, what's your favorite color? What was your first car
Yeah.
when you were whatever the thing is?
Yeah, you get it.
So I'm curious, what are some other things that you do to help people stick around for 36 months?
Yeah, I would say very similar to you. We have something called the 7 core tenets of a great session, right? Exactly the same thing. Name game. Greeted by name within 10 seconds of entering the front door. Well, if you just look at that one thing, right? I mean, it's been proven like your name is the sweetest sound in all of language to you, right? You could be in a crowded room and maybe not even hearing that well. If somebody says your name, you could pick it up, right? It's a limbic response to hearing your name. So how do you bake that into your systems? Well, you come up with a metric, can we do it within 10 seconds or less? And then if you think about how that parlays itself into everything that you choose, like we can't have the facilities be too large, right? If we know we're only going to have one coach on the floor at any given time, training 6 people, we have to make sure that the floor space stays small enough to feel intimate, because you might even end up in a session where there's 4 people instead of 6, right? It just happens. It's life, right? They're not always full every single session. And so if that's the case, does it still feel intimate? Is there still good energy in the room? Plus, it puts the coach who's on the floor close enough to the front where they can, in fact, greet someone within 10 seconds of entering the door, right? Other things in that are like everyone gets touched, not like creepy touch, but like a touch on the arm, right? Or a pat on the back. And we know from studies in other industries, like physicians, as an example, they note if they touch a patient during, if it's not forced during the medical examination, if they just touch a patient on the arm or something like that, their perceived time spent with that physician goes up by 20%. So like, why can't we just touch clients? And it happens sometimes when you're spotting or doing those things, but maybe it's just a slap on the back or a touch on the arm, right? So things like that. Now, also, there's other things that you can do with that smaller number that drive that retention rate. Like we robbed something directly from the Ritz-Carlton. It's called Surprisingly Personable. So every month we set aside a budget in our facilities for $200 a month, and we literally just gift clients randomly. And it's the randomness that makes it so special, right? If it's like a reward system where if you come in this many times, you get this, or you get points towards this, that's all fine and dandy. Getting a message on your birthday. I mean, your dentist can do that. That just comes out of your software. But how many types of facilities can actually just give you a random gift that you like based on a conversation, right? And so we do that. And it might be, the example I use is we had a lady who had moved down from Chicago. She was a huge sports fan. One of her parents wasn't doing well. They were hospitalized in Chicago, and she was kind of busted up about it. She couldn't get back there as often as she wanted. She's a huge sports fan. So we bought her a Chicago Bears sweatshirt, gave it to her, and said, hey, look, I know it's been tough moving down with your parents being sick. We just wanted to give you something and acknowledge the fact that we appreciate that you're coming in consistently and doing something for you in this really hard time. And she just shed tears on the spot, right? That type of stuff is something you can do when you have 150 or less members. And those are the type of things that really move the needle from a cultural and retention standpoint, right? So those are just a couple of examples. Heck, you had one of them, the 8. We had 7 core tenants, same, right? But I think more importantly are all these other soft touch things that we can do, and we have many of them that are systemized that can really drive that engagement. And if we could only do that again if we had that 150 or less people.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, this is exactly why, again, I can remember the not conversation, but your talk from 10 years ago, because a lot of these things you were hitting on even then. Maybe you didn't know them as in depth, or some of them are newer than others, but a lot of them you were hitting on then. And that's why, it resonated with me so much. And it's still like when you sit there and talk about it, it still gets me excited and I'm ready to go open a gym again.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
recommend it all the way. I'm just saying, call me.
It's on the list. It's on the list.
That's right.
So from a strictly population client standpoint, what's one thing that you can tell somebody about the to help them understand the importance of sticking to it.
Yeah, I
Because
think.
the
Oh, go ahead.
instant gratification culture is so prevalent. It's another thing that's just so prevalent. I want it fast, I want it quick.
Yeah.
It's one thing, doesn't have to be one thing, but what's one thing you can say for the importance of sticking with it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like just showing up. It's so cliche, and you've heard it stated in a million different ways, but it's true. That's why you've heard it stated in a million different ways, right? Just show up. And I think the value of having a personal trainer is you have an appointment, and there's a small group of people there that know you really well, and they're all expecting you to show up. So sometimes just that, because there is no quick fix, unfortunately. I mean, we often talk about fitness is very difficult to sell because everyone knows they need it, they just don't want it, right? If there was a pill, they would take it. I mean, look at the popularity of semaglutide, or Ozempic is the brand name that we've heard right now for fat loss. Well, all it does is blunt your hunger, right? But what's interesting is the best physicians in the world will say, okay, that's great, but rapid weight loss, which is all that it is, there's no real magic to it other than the fact that you just eat a lot less and you're going to
It's
lose a lot of weight in a
faster,
short period of
right?
time. It's faster. Yeah, it's just makes it easier to eat less, put it that way, right? But if you're going to do that in rapid weight loss, as you know, with your experience, you're going to lose some muscle tissue. And that's the kiss of death as you get into, I mean, I would say at any age, but certainly over 30, when we all are experiencing natural sarcopenia anyway, if we're not active. But, our customer avatar is like 45 to 65, and sometimes even older. So that population, 100%, right? The first and foremost, you need to maintain your strength, which means maintain your lean tissue. So even with the popularity of quick fixes, to your point, like Ozempic or semaglutide, if we will, you still have to do strength training. So there's still a place for a brand like ours with that can coexist with quick fixes. The fact is, there isn't a pill for all things fitness, right? You're not going to improve your VO2 max, which is a great predictor of longevity. You're not going to improve your strength. Now, blunting your hunger, yeah, great. That's going to help you lose weight. And that could be really healthy, especially if you're obese, right? But I think those two things can coexist, right? I really do. And I would just say to anyone listening that's not in the fitness industry, because it's hard for you and I probably to stay out of like the deep dive into like our deep knowledge. But if someone's listening who's just a recreational fitness consumer or thinking about getting in shape, I would say hire a coach, alloy or not, that's just going to hold you accountable to do the thing. Because at the end of the day, you have to pay the piper, right? You have to move a little bit more outside the gym, just walk, right? You have to do some strength training because keeping your strength up, that's your framework, right? That's the frame of your engine, if you will. You have to do it. And there's no other way to do it right now. You have to pay the piper. And so staying consistent is just about showing up. And I will tell you, as you know, from a habitual standpoint, psychologically, if you can make a commitment to yourself, most important person, and you can hold that commitment, and whatever mechanisms you need to do, hiring a coach, having an appointment, whatever those things are, right? If you can show up for yourself consistently, and that's the most important person that you need to prove that you can do the thing is yourself. If you can do that, it will cascade into all other areas of your life. If you can say you think of yourself now as a person who can't stick to a fitness routine, well, that makes it really hard then to make a great choice at lunch, right? Or, what do I care? I can have ice cream at night because I'm the person that doesn't stick to exercise. Well, let's say that you change that narrative and you hire a coach and you start working out a couple of days a week and you don't miss for a couple of months. Now you're a different person and you view yourself differently, which is the most important thing. So now I'm a person that consistently exercises. Okay, what type of choice does that person make at lunch, right? Much different than the person who can't stick to exercise. So a lot of it is just changing your own narrative about who you are and how you function around this sort of one pillar in your life, which is fitness. And one way to, I mean, you got to get started somewhere. And that's why I like some accountability and someone who can just make it easier just to show up, because just showing up turns out to be the key, right? It really does. Whether it's, we joke about six pack abs, whatever, like, let's just say we want to show up better in our lives as a parent, spouse, partner, mother, father, whatever those things are, right? You want to be the best version of yourself. Fitness is a huge component of that. There's no research that would dispute that these days. So find a mechanism that gets you to show up consistently. Once you prove it to yourself, that self-efficacy, then you can start making better choices. And you'll look back in a year or two and you're a completely different person, right? And you even view yourself differently. And as I mentioned, that's the most important thing.
Solid.
Yeah, I mean, you know it from being in the industry, but I think if you're not, you're always looking for the thing, right? Like, what's the magic pill?
Hmm.
What's the one thing? What's the one thing I can do? And there's not, unfortunately, right? I mean, showing up is the magic pill. And so whatever you
Well,
need to do to get yourself to show up, enjoy the thing you do, right? Like, start with that and just start small. Like, don't blow up your whole life. Like, stack your habits. So start with 2 days a week, and then maybe go to 3. Then do some things outside the gym, right? And then as you build that self-efficacy and you view yourself differently, that will start to manifest itself in all these small ways. And the sum of those small ways over a couple of years is massive. You massive change in your life.
mhm. Yeah, I like to say you either pay now or you pay later.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Like it's much better to pay the piper now. I would argue that it makes the quality of every bit of your life while you're doing it much better. But then long term, if you do end up in a place of sickness, injury, whatever that is, it's going to be just as expensive, literally and figuratively, right? As expensive later. So why not pay the piper now? And not only will it make your life better immediately right now. I mean, when you hear the testimonials and you had them from your gym, hey, I've been working out for 2 months. I feel completely different. And this is someone in their 60s who hasn't worked out in 25 years. It's like, I'm a different person in 2 months. So the crux move is just to get started and just to keep showing up. So whatever will get you to do that, just do that.
Get started, keep showing up. I love it.
That's it.
Rick, I appreciate you so much, brother. Thanks for coming on the show. Tell me, where do people find you?
Yeah, look, if you're interested in franchising at all, that's what we do now. It's alloyfranchise.com. You can go to alloypersonaltraining.com for our consumer site. And then I'm Rick Mayo, Mayo, and I'm all over social media. So you can find me everywhere you want. If you need any help, just reach out. I'll help you however I can.
Great conversation, brother. I appreciate you so much. Thanks, Rick.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.